You know, when I was a freshman in the state senate, I was pretty proud to be there, as you might imagine, as we all are. And we were about halfway through the first session, and my good friend, already then, and my to-be mentor, Senator Ted Fisher, came to me one day as we took a break on the floor, and he says, "Bubba, let's take a walk." And so I said, okay. So we went outside, and I thought he wanted to smoke, you know. But we walked around the Capitol, and you know, as it turned out, the day before I had cast a vote that maybe wasn't exactly what my leadership wanted me to do. And you know, the darndest thing, after that walk, I changed that vote. Now, okay, let's be honest. You know, a freshman member getting called to the woodshed is not exactly a new thing, right? But here's the interesting part about that story. I never knew he had taken me to the woodshed. Now, I'm not stupid, but that's just Ted. That's the way he handled things. He never told me I had to change my vote. He never even asked me. But I knew, after talking to Ted, that's what I needed to do. He had that impact on the members of the state senate. If Ted was for it, it's probably okay. Now, how many people can say that? Think about when we changed the name of the system. You know, a lot of us still talk about VOTEC. There was a lot of anxiety about changing the name. We've got something really good here. Do we really need to do this? But when Ted spoke for it, and he said, this is something we need to do for the system, it was all right. Ted was for it, it must be okay. You know, Ted was a leader in the Senate long before he was ever elected or designated a committee chair or served any other leadership position. He had and continues to have that quality. Ted did the hardest job in the Senate for the last 4 years that he was there. He was the floor leader. And those of you that have been down there and know how the system works knows there is no tougher job in the Capitol. You make no friends, you tell people no, and they pretty much hate you. But that all changed when Ted did the job as floor leader. After 4 years of doing that job, when term limits took him, you wouldn't believe the things that people had to say about the job that Ted had done. I can say without hesitation, and know it's completely true, Ted Fisher served in that capacity better than anyone who's ever done the job in 100 years of this state. No one is more respected or more well-liked than Ted Fisher. notwithstanding the fact that he had been the floor leader. You know, Ted taught us all so much. You know, they told me I had a couple of minutes to do this, and I thought, how do you sum this guy up in just a couple of minutes? You know, I think about what we saw on the screen, the Julie Delcour's piece, and the line that said, a position of responsibility, not a position of power. And that was the way Ted Fisher served in the state Senate and served the people of the state of Oklahoma. He never, ever treated this position as one of power. Now, I know it's a shock to you all, but you know, we have some people that kind of think that. There's an ego or two in the Capitol, right? But Ted never approached the job that way. And what's better is he taught the rest of us not to approach the job that way. Now, he became well known for his work in economic development, for his support of education. You know, the things that he has done for this state are documented, and I could spend many, many minutes up here telling you about them. But suffice it to say tonight, folks, that your life as an Oklahoman has been enhanced because this man chose to serve in the state Senate. That's quite a legacy. Having said these nice things, I gotta say the one thing, though, that stands out in my mind about Ted Fisher is this. When there is a crisis, when the chips are down and things are tough, there is no one, I repeat, no one, I would rather have in the foxhole with me than Ted Fisher. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to present for induction to the Career Tech Hall of Fame a true statesman, a leader, and a man I'm so proud to call my good friend, Senator Ted Fisher.
Rather touching. First, let me say thanks to the foundation. Now, I have no idea who the foundation is, but whomever you are, you have made me one happy man. I've been paid a great tribute. Next, I would like to thank those who traveled here this evening. It's very flattering to me that so many of you came. My introduction to this affair was 2 years ago when I was the presenter posthumously for Sam Combs Jr., and it's very flattering to me that his son, Sam III, his wife, Rita, and O'Meara are here tonight. Thank you for coming. Chancellor Glenn Johnson and Melinda and Amanda Pagliata, a Senate staffer for so many years that came, and I appreciate your being here. Indulge me to introduce my family, my wife Judy. Please stand, honey. My daughter Britton and my son-in-law Jeff Pryor, who is about to give me a 6th grandchild. My 2 sisters, Joyce McKenzie and Judy, and Gerald Cheney, my brother-in-law. Thank you. They drove in from Louisiana, and I'm so appreciative of your attendance. I can't begin to tell you how flattered I am to be even mentioned in the same breath as my fellow recipients. I'd like to tell you that my first thought upon receiving this honor when Phil Wall called me was whose life I would like to grace by asking them to be my presenter.
They all said no.
But if I'm going to be truthful about this, my first thought was really, who would drive all the way to Stillwater for me? And then it hit me. Mike Morgan lives in Stillwater. He'd be perfect. Then I began to have doubts again. Mike might laugh when I ask him. I mean, I could almost hear him say, "They're giving you what?" But I mustered up the nerve and to ask him, and after a short silence, I'm going to say 5-10 minutes, he agreed. And I must say he's done a masterful job of flowering things up, don't you think? Of all the presenters, he definitely had the toughest job. And thank you, Mr. President. I appreciate you doing that. What a wonderful thing we have in Oklahoma in our education system, in that we have the gold standard for career education, not only in the United States, but on the planet. As there's no other state that can brag about their organization like we brag about Career Tech. As chairman of the Senate Economic Development Committee for some 14, maybe 16 years, I forget, it was always a huge advantage to our recruiting efforts when we rolled out our Career Tech package. And I've always been very, very proud of the leadership in the Career Tech system. Dr. Roy Peters, whom you met earlier, was my first exposure to a state director. He and I have been around the world together. And then came Dr. Ann Benson, who, believe me, folks, you're going to meet her in a minute, and I'm telling you, she's been through the fires of political hell. And she walked out the other side gracefully. And then our very own Dr. Phil, who, Oprah, eat your heart out. Where are you, Dr. Phil? We're glad you're here. But my real exposure and learning of Career Tech was at the feet of John Hopper at Central Tech, the only higher education institution in my district, by the way. But John taught me much. He taught me that Joan of Arc was not Noah's wife. Then I was blessed with Ron Vandiver, the most talented man who had to work very hard to convince me that Mount Rushmore was not a natural phenomenon. But at Central Tech, we also had our own Dr. Phil Wall, and who's been a great friend for so long. But seriously, these three leaders of our local Career Tech, we're not boosters not only for Career Tech, but for the entire state of Oklahoma. And for their service and example, I shall always be grateful. You know, each life is a book and a story, if you will, and each of us is the author of our story. We get to write it. We get to say how the story ends. But every now and then, there are times when others write a page for us. Tonight, a very special page has been inserted by all of you into my otherwise pretty mundane story. Thank you so much for this very special honor.